So in this video, I want to talk about some of the things we saw happening in the previous video. I'm going to kind of analyze what we see going on in this video. One of the first things, so you might have watched the video and been kind of confused about specifically what was happening, and we want to talk about how is it that you get unconfused, right? We won't, for most of this semester, we won't be talking about videos. We're going to be talking about readings. But when you have readings, oftentimes you are going to be confused by those as well. And we want to talk about how we get ourselves unconfused. What is it that we can do? What are some tricks we can rely on to figure out specifically what is going to be going on? Realize that you should be confused about some of the things you see or some of the things we read. Because if you're not confused by the things that you read, it means that the things I'm giving you are too easy. Because you want to have something that's going to be somewhat challenging. If things are too easy, there's no opportunity for you to learn, right? If you're going to, if somebody's lifting weights and the weight that they're lifting is so easy for them, they're not going to be building up any muscle. The only way in which they're going to actually build up muscle is by doing something that's going to be a little bit difficult, right? And you do that thing that's really difficult over and over, and then slowly you get better and better at it. You build up those muscles, and then you can move to the next stage. So we want to be doing the same kind of thing here. You want to be kind of building up your analysis muscles, your ability to be able to analyze the readings that we have, and in this case, analyze a video. So this video, I will think about it in some ways as almost like a visual poem. It's got a lot of images going on, and you see a lot of pictures, a lot of things going on here, and then we have to kind of sort through what they all mean. And one of the reasons I like to start with a video is that on some level we're used to the language of something visual, a video, more than we are to the words, many of us. And so I like to start with something that we're kind of used to, right? Something that on some level should be kind of comfortable. And then we can talk through some of the ideas there and see how they apply to poems that we're going to be talking about. So one of the first things you see that I'm paused on this image that you saw a number of times in the video. By the way, let me just mention this video was created by a former student of mine. I like to say that because we might think about, well, this is something that's way out there and so complicated. This is somebody who is, in a class with me, just like you're in a class with me. But a number of times we're going to see this image of oil and water being poured in there together, and it shows up throughout the film. It's not accidental that it shows up a lot. One of the things that happens is that if things get repeated, as we all know, that means that they're going to be important. That's why I'm always saying, in the videos that I made earlier, I was always saying, make sure to contact me. Email me, call me, keep in contact over the course of this semester, because I think that's really important, right? Anything that we think is important, we say a lot. And this filmmaker has got something that they think is important to say, so they're going to say it a number of times. Throughout the video, we're going to see this oil and water. There it is at 123 again. I can scroll through. I mean, it definitely shows up at the end there at 311. I think it shows up at some other point throughout here, but it showed, there we go, at 225. It shows up a number of times throughout there. And it's like this person is yelling at you, hey, this is an important thing. Pay attention. So what is it that can be important about this? On some level, this video is it's about a lot of things. We've got lots of images of India and then images of the United States, and there's a lot of different things that are going on here. But this general picture, again, if it's going to be important, we have to think important. And one of the things is, if by itself something seems like it's not necessarily that important, it means it's probably important in a way that's not literal. That is, this isn't actually a film about oil and water. It is metaphorically a film about oil and water. That is, this oil and water is here not to tell us, let me tell you all the properties of what happens when you try to mix oil and water, which is that they don't mix. But if we want to say what this film is about oil and water not mixing, but really that's a metaphor for maybe how this person might feel about something else. So if you see something that shows up a lot and doesn't make sense in a literal way, why do we care about how oil and water mixes in a glass? Then we're supposed to say, oh, this is a metaphor. Literal means that something is what it actually is, right? So if we say that oil and water, if we say that oil and water don't mix, we can say that literally, and well, that may be true, but for most things, we don't care about that. Most of us aren't trying to mix oil and water. So literally, what that we're actually talking about is not that important to us necessarily. But metaphorically, that is going to be important potentially. So the idea is that this oil and water is a metaphor for, that is, it's going to kind of describe something else. And so a metaphor is a way of talking about one thing in terms of something else. The easiest way to do that is we can talk about the cousin of the metaphor, which is the simile. Okay, and similes are easier because we say things like, I feel sometimes like I am a glass filled with oil and water, right? And we use that like in there, and that's a simile. Similes use like or as. Metaphors do not do that. So if we say, I feel sometimes like I am a glass filled with oil and water, that's a simile, and we can understand that we're making a comparison there, that we're not supposed to actually think about the oil and water, we're supposed to think about how that oil and water represent some other idea. Now, if we have a metaphor, we simply make that comparison without saying like or as. And so instead of saying, I feel like a glass filled with oil and water, that's the simile. For the metaphor, we'd say, I am a glass of oil and water, right? That is, we simply state that without putting in the like or as. And you're like, well, you're a glass of oil and water. What does that mean? And we're supposed to say, oh, I don't take that literally. That's not what you actually mean. That is instead what you representing what you feel like. And so that becomes a really important thing. It's one of the things that throws us a lot of times in literature is when we're dealing with things like similes and metaphors, things that are not that we can't take literally, and we have to kind of figure out what it is that they're supposed to mean. And we're used to, of course, dealing with things like our emotions and things like that through similes and metaphors. If we want to talk about feeling bad about something, right? You know, I've got this, I feel, you know, my soul feels like the dark of night, right? That's a simile, or I can say, my soul is the dark of night, right? As a metaphor. Either when I do those kinds of comparisons, you understand that that's a dark feeling I'm trying to get inside. And even that dark is a metaphor, because dark is not a thing that actually goes on in a feeling. It's just that we know what darkness is. It's something that we see, and we put that into how it is that we feel. And so if you look at the rest of this film then as being this glass and water as being a metaphor, and everything else that we get in this film is on some level going to be about how this woman feels about these two cultures that she has. If you go back and look at the film again, you can see that it starts out with all these images of India. Okay, pictures. Sorry, that runs a little bit slow. Pictures of India. Even at the very beginning, it starts out with a picture of the Taj Mahal, probably the most famous building in India. And so we have all these images of India. And then you can see things like over here, she's actually going to get onto an airplane, right? We get onto an airplane. And from the airplane, where are we going to end up, right? We have some confusion here. We can see some kind of confusion that we might get with these kinds of images, these kind of spirals. But then after we go through that kind of confusion, you can see that we end up where? In in America. And then we can think about through the rest of the film, and I want you to write and think about this. In what ways is she talking about coming to the United States, and how that makes her feel on some level like oil and water, right? And so I want you to discuss that. And then for the other discussion board, I'm going to want you to discuss, post a metaphor, and I'll post a specific assignment, but I want you to post a metaphor that explains, that you're going to use to help explain an emotion that you have. So she's oil and water that explains all that, and again, I want you to talk about what she is then going to say about how she feels about coming to the United States, right? What are all these images of these young women getting, getting dressed up? How does that fit in with all this? Why, when we've got these before we get to the young women getting dressed up, we've got her going, shh, be quiet. How does that fit in? And so go back and look at the film again and think rather carefully about how this metaphor of the oil and water helps us understand some of the other things in the film.